Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Great Big Plugin Show on Puremix or on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're watching this. I don't know, but we're watching it. So today is a very exciting one. We're going to be talking about the Capital Mastering Compressor. This thing's been out for a couple weeks, and spoiler alert, this is going to be less of a review show and more of a like how do you use it show, because it's awesome. So if you were just coming to like get an opinion on it, that's all we got. Thanks for watching. Just kidding. All right, we're back. All right, we're going to be diving into the Capital Mastering Compressor, and I'm very excited about this. So right off the bat, here it is. This is the interface, and it looks very familiar to us in the world of Fairchild plugins, right? So just by the general aesthetic of it, we've got like the giant VU meters and the big black knobs and everything. And that's immediately where my brain went, because when I first heard about this plugin, I assumed, like many people, this isn't something that was even on my radar. I didn't know about it. I had never heard of this thing ever. And I'm a little bit of a nerd, just slight nerd, and I know about a lot of compressors. So I was excited to see this come out, and I knew that it would be exciting. There's some really, really good people over at Capital Mastering that if they're going to put something out, it's probably going to be amazing. A couple of weeks ago, we reviewed the Magic Death Eye compressor on the show. Not related to this compressor. However, the same certain personnel were probably also involved there, because I believe it's Ian Sheffield. I'm probably butchering that name and I apologize, but we talked about it during the Magic Death Eye episode, and he works at Capital Mastering. It's hard to believe that if they made a custom unit, he was not involved. So this is an emulation of a custom mastering compressor that is used in Capital Mastering. And we'll just go over the basic interface as we do here. And again, like, things feel very familiar to the Fairchild world, with some exceptions for sure. So just looking at the very top here, just looking at the left channel, we've got input. We've got a sidechain filter toggle, and then we've got threshold, attack, release, ratio, output. It's a compressor. What do you want? So it's got all those things on it. And then we've got a couple extra buttons here. So there's channel in, which is like a bypass. Below that, we've got a channel link, so I could do individual bypass on each one of them if I wanted to. I'll keep those linked for now. And then just a repeat of all the controls there. If we go over to the meter section, we've got some really cool lights, and we've got mid-side or left-right control. For those who aren't familiar, compressing mid-side versus left-right. If you're compressing mid-side, you're doing all of the mono information, so the information that's the same in both the left and right channel appears in your phantom center right up the middle. The side information is the difference between the left and right channels, and that's the information that appears in your side channels. So if we're in mid-side, the top controls will compress just the center of the signal, and the bottom controls will compress the sides, so the difference information that's happening on the left and right. Over to the right, we've got our meter select, so we can go input, V, and attenuation. Input and attenuation. And then below that, our sidechain control, so we can decide if we want to look at this in dual mono or if we want to link the sidechain. So dual mono, again, for the uninitiated, if you had, say, like there's a song going along and there's a giant tom fill and the floor tom's just popping out of the speaker and you were mastering the song, you could go into dual mono, set your settings for that section maybe and automate it, but you could compress just that part of it independently of what the left channel is doing. So whether or not you're linking those right there. On the bottom, we've got a whole bunch of other controls. Some of these are familiar to other plugins that we've seen from Universal Audio and from other manufacturers. We've got the handy dandy mix knob, which we're going to talk about because I actually read the manual on this, and there's some important information about the mix knob, so we'll look at that. The headroom control, very useful on this plugin. We'll talk about it. It's basically the amount of headroom that is happening before compression enters the circuit, so you can effectively alter where the fixed threshold, it's not fixed, there's different increments, but you can effectively alter how hard you're hitting that circuit. We'll talk about it with the manual because that'll be better. Monofold is deciding how much of the low end information do we want on the side of the mix, right? So again, going back to the difference between mono and sides, if we turn up the monofold frequency, say to 200, everything below 200 will appear in the center only and come out of the sides. I'm sure there's a gentle roll off to that. It's not just going to be a brick wall at 200, but basically we're sending more information into the center of the stereo image and working with it that way. So handy for dealing with something where it has too much bass information on the sides. And we've got gain, and then we've got a shape knob for the saturator circuit, which is a very exciting part of this whole unit. We're going to look at the manual to talk about it more extensively, but a lot of the tone of this thing is happening here. It's not right for everything, but it's a very useful knob for a lot of different styles, and we'll get into that. Over to the right, we've got some handy meters. We can either monitor in LUFS or DBFS and check out how we're doing on levels. So we'll get through all that, but before we get started on this, let's go over to the manual to look at a little bit of information here. And I wanted to talk about the mix knob first because this is very important. The mix knob on this guy, the control determines the balance between the compressor's original and processed signal to facilitate parallel compression. Range being from 0 to 100, no surprise there. However, the mix control adjusts only the compressed signal. Other controls, like the gain and saturation knobs, are still happening, still in the process of the signal, regardless of the mix control setting. So if you do something extreme on the saturator and you turn back the mix knob thinking like, that's really cool, I like that, but I want a little bit less of it, but I don't want to make it change how it's hitting the saturation knob, so I'll turn down the mix, that won't work here. The saturation's happening no matter what. So it might react differently, but that's basically what's happening. And for that, we have a block diagram at the top of the manual that we can look at. Monofold is, again, created there. So the description for the saturator and shape knob, the saturator adds harmonic content and increases the apparent loudness by changing the small signal gain of the saturator. You can mix in saturation with the shape knob and available range. We know that. Use the gain control to push further into saturation. So if we want more distortion, we can use the gain knob that precedes the saturation knob to push into that circuit. So useful stuff there. Those are things that are not necessarily intuitive on the plugin. It'd be impossible to make them so with a good GUI. So always important, just a reminder, read the manual. Yeah. So let's go up a little bit. We got some questions about where to get the plugin. This plugin, very important note about this. This is part of the UAD Spark subscription model. I believe that you can get this standalone as well. However, it's included with their subscription. And again, this was a thing where it just kind of dropped out of nowhere. And because I have a Spark subscription, I saw the Capital compressor and I was like, oh, never heard of that. It's UAD, it's Capital. Let's check it out. So pretty cool. If you haven't checked out a Spark subscription, I am not paid to say this, but you should check it out. So there's really, really good stuff in there. And it doesn't require any UAD hardware to run it. It's all native and on your CPU. Good people over there, those UAD guys. All right, so let's dive in here. I have a track pulled up from Vance Powell. This is, the band is Illiterate Light, and the track is called Sweet Beast. This song is not mixed. It's just a balance, but a balance on Vance Powell's recordings are, you know, they always sound amazing anyway. So we're going to have sort of the, you know, if we'll take a look at it in a mastering scenario first, and then we'll check it out on some individual instruments as well, maybe some buses. But I like this example because it doesn't sound like a finished mix per se, or like it's got some issues with it, if you would, mostly just in the balance that I set up, nothing that Vance did. But sometimes things come in for mastering this way, right? Where it's like, it's not the greatest mix in the world. And for whatever reason, you're not going to get a better mix. So you got to work with what you got. So I like it for this example for mastering. So let's check it out. I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to make sure I'm on the default settings. We are tweaking knobs. And you guys in the chat can let me know if you want to hear anything specific as we go through this. That's one of the benefits of doing this show as a live stream instead of a pre-record, is you guys get to interact with me. Tell me that you want me to put it on a snare drum, yell at me that I'm doing something wrong, whatever it happens to be. Let's have some fun and make this your show too. So here we go from the top. Let me just make sure this guy's muted. And if you haven't, this is also the song is from a start to finish series on Puremix, so you can watch the entire making of this song from the pre-production, just playing the song in the room with Vance for the first time, all the way to Vance finishing the final mix, which is pretty rad. So here we go. Okay, so that's our song with the plugin in bypass. Now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to dial in a setting that I like for this thing. I'm going to go through all the controls, try out some different ratios, all of that stuff, and then we'll stop and talk about it. So here we go. Let's talk about a little bit of what I just heard. So initially, I was just kind of bringing it in and out. I gain matched a little bit. I was pushing the input signal, and I was just noticing a nice job of it just kind of escape the mix and come forward. Same with the snare drum. Those are things that are kind of popping out of the mix as they get louder and quieter. So just as soon as I turned it on, I just kind of noticed a natural gluing before the meter was even really moving, of it just kind of like keeping things a little bit more parked. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to leave the plugin in bypass and I'm going to play the chorus. And then just with these basic settings that we have, which is just me pushing in a little bit. I've got the threshold turned up a hair. I'm going to back it off. We're just going to listen to kind of the natural tone of it. Pay attention to those things popping in and out. And here we go. 1 second. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Alright, baby, alright. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Perfect. So a good example of that happening was just on the rights after all right. You would hear the right word pop up out of the speakers a little bit. The compressor was just kind of keeping that parked and holding it in there, which is really, really awesome. So let's keep going, and I'm going to play with some of these knobs. I'm going to make it pump a little bit, make it a little unnatural, then try to back some of the compression off and just see if I get a useful, fun setting out of it. So here we go. Okay, awesome. So just finding a way to kind of glue things in a little bit more together, not doing a crazy amount of compression in the end of that. I just kind of buried it, found some settings that I liked for the most part, just moving quickly with the attack and release knobs, and then backed off the threshold so I wasn't killing it, but I was feeling like that nice sense of glue, if you will. So that's things not escaping forward out of the speakers. I'm hearing the depth of the image come forward a little bit, and things just aren't quite as distant. Hearing some more like the room, some more of the reverb tails, all of that stuff, where it doesn't feel so distant and disconnected. So again, I really love this thing. I've been using it for a couple weeks now, and just a huge fan of it. So that's the basic controls for the compressor. I haven't really messed with the ratio. There's no indicator for what your ratio settings are, so this is just something that I would go back and forth about, testing with different ratios to see what felt good, basically. But I don't know what these ratios are, and it kind of doesn't matter because a lot of this is just about reacting to what you're hearing, and I almost like that they didn't put it on there. So now we're going to go down to the bottom here, and we're going to play with some of these other knobs. So I'm going to jump right to, like, say, the mono fold, and we'll take a listen to that, and then we'll check out the saturator right after. So here we go. So this is the great example. If you listen to the kick drum in the left and the right, in the side, the wide part of the image on this, as I turn up the monofold, you'll hear that kick drum go from being this really cool blooming low end in the room down to like shrinking into the center of the image a little bit, and it's just going to clean up the sides. Now, whether or not that's a good thing is up to the user, right? Of course, as always, but in this case, this is something that you think about as a mastering engineer. It's very style dependent, right? So useful feature, but if you take too much of Vance's low end out of the sides, Vance might not like that. So let's see which one actually sounds cooler while we're listening to this. Here we go. So yeah, I wouldn't go too far with that because it gets a little thin and wimpy on the outside, whereas it was like nice and girthy and pretty intense before. So I would leave it as it is. Let's move on to the saturator and check this out. All right, that solo is going to be crazy loud, so we'll wait on that. But yeah, so you're hearing some of the tone of the saturator as we push into it. I did use the trick from the manual, and I turned up the gain a little bit to drive that circuit a little bit harder. Wound up like landing somewhere around 50%. If I go too far, what I'm hearing is not just distortion, but a little bit of like a mid-range pop that that hurts, a little bit on my ears. It's a little bit harsh, maybe. So finding a sweet spot is good where it adds some excitement, but it doesn't get crazy. Again, I'm also hearing that the density of the mix come into play here, where there's not as much distance between something that is like a quiet reverb tail and the lead vocal. We're kind of like bringing everything together into a package. And when I say glue, that's what I mean. It's just taking something that might seem dynamically like it's this wide and just kind of bringing it together, and making it easier to hear what I call the back wall if you think front to back. Just kind of bringing that front wall forward. So next thing that we can do is take a look at our level and see where we're ending up here. So let's check out the LUFS meter in here, and we'll look at some dB full scale stuff. And then if anybody's noticed, I've been pushing this pretty hard, but I haven't seen a whole crazy amount of clipping going on. So we're going to talk about that too. Here we go. Which is actually starting to get pretty up there. It's not crazy. It's not a pop mix where we're going -6 or -2 like the one I got in last week. That was cool. That rough mix that came in at -2. I was super happy about that. But we're not talking about that. So let's go and just check this out against Process Audio's decibel. And I want to see what's going on with our true peak here, because I have a suspicion that there's obviously limiting built into the compressor that we're not seeing it on the meters as like smacking down like a limiter. There's no gain reduction like a limiter, but there naturally must be, because if I bypass, you hear how much dynamic range there is, and then with it on, we're not hearing that, and we're getting pretty loud levels. So let's check it out. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Alright, baby, alright. Can we find another way? Self-defense, hey, I lost some friends. Yeah, my own worst enemy is my head. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Okay, so obviously I'm still able to peak this thing, so no output limiter on it. However, there's a really handy other feature on here with the headroom control. If I wanted to, say I got it kind of to a place where I liked it, but I was still feeling like the client wants it louder, I got to keep pushing it up, get closer to that -2 thing that happened. I would look over to this headroom knob and see what happens if I start reducing it. We could also see about raising the input, but I've already raised it up as high as it'll go. So let's just see if we can get this thing to be, let's play video games. Let's just go for like I don't know, 8, and just see if we can get it to sound good. And yeah, I don't know. Let's find out what happens. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Alright, baby, alright. Can we find another way? Self-defense, hey, I lost some friends. Yeah, my own worst enemy is my head. Sweet beast on a sweet leash, trying so hard to escape. Alright, baby, alright. Can we find another way? Yeah, so now it's biting on that vocal a little too much, and I don't really like it when it starts getting, super loud anyway. That's not really a thing that I gravitate toward. But yeah, many things are possible with this compressor. And valuable note here that was also mentioned in the manual, the plus and minus signs on the headroom knob are pretty useful for just jumping into increments, and then just easier control than if you're going left and right on your mouse. Up to you how you like it, but you do have these available as buttons. That's also a feature on like the API 550. If you see the plus and minus signs, those will usually allow you to turn it up and down if they're not just continuous pots. Yeah, so there's some other things that we could play with. You know, we could high pass the side chain to avoid some of that compression on the bottom. The vocal was triggering it. Obviously, this is not a great mix. It's just like a balance, and it's not even a 2-track that we're working on here, but I'm treating it as though it is. Is there anything that you guys would like to hear this on? Let me know in the chat while we're going. But yeah, basically the general vibe is I love this thing. I found it super useful. I've used it both in mixing scenarios on individual tracks. I've used it in mastering scenarios in those couple weeks, and I did use it across a couple buses on a mix as well. I think I put it across a vocal bus just to get a little bit more control on it, and I was really liking what it did. The saturator thing has like a little bit of a mid-range pop to me. Definitely adds, you know, excitement if you're looking for that, but it can get a little crazy sometimes too. And don't forget that the gain knob feeds into the saturator knob, and these are independent of the mix knob. So no matter what you do here, this is all still happening after the circuit. So good to remember. Awesome. I think that's probably going to do it for us today, guys. If you have any questions, let us know down in the comments below. As always, do tune in. We'll be back in 2 weeks at 2:30 p.m. Eastern for another episode of the Great Big Plugin Show. If you haven't, make sure that you hit the thumbs up, ring the notification bell, subscribe. Those things help us keep content like this coming. Thank you guys so much for watching, and do go check out the plugin. Thanks.